Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. First of all, I am a firm believer that time is the most valuable currency we have. And I am so grateful to each and every one of you for choosing to spend your Saturday here at Longwood among plants, admiring the beauty, and learning about science. I mean, I'm just gonna say it, you all have your priorities straight. Now, it doesn't matter if you're a visitor, a member, or an innovator, your support that you are giving to Longwood is truly what makes this place so exceptional. So thank you so much for being here, and by supporting Longwood, we're all supporting something so much bigger than ourselves. It is my absolute pleasure today to introduce you to Dr. Kate Santos, our Associate Vice President of Science here at Longwood. Kate's career journey, which spans industry, academia, and nonprofits, has always been deeply rooted in the world of plants. From her childhood spent outdoors to her prestigious career in horticulture. After receiving a Ph.D. in environmental horticulture from the University of Florida, she worked for Coastal Farms before she rose through the ranks of one of the global leaders of flower breeding, Dooman Orange, where she was the regional director for the Americas. She is now the leader of our science program, which means she leads the following programs: land stewardship and ecology, conservation horticulture, collections, soil and compost, science communication, and floriculture production. Honestly, you all are in for such a treat today, hearing from Kate, because she is going to be talking about the vast depth and breadth of our science. And she'll be highlighting our notable science accomplishments over the past year, our research projects currently underway, and her vision for the future. So thank you again for being here, and I hope that you enjoy today's talk. So Dr. Kate Santos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jessica, for the lovely introduction, and thank you to all of you for joining us today in our Science Series talk. And thank you for visiting the gardens. I am really excited to share with you today what we're doing in science, and just to give you a deep look into some of the things that we are really excited about here. I can imagine for many of you, when you hear the word science, the words labs and test tubes come to mind, which we do have here, actually not too far behind this wall. But science is also all around us in our natural lands, our gardens, and our conservatories. In fact, horticultural, ecological, and agricultural science underpin much of what is required to bring to life these beautiful gardens that you're visiting today. Science is connected to each of the iconic spaces pictured here in these slides because plants are connected to each of these places. And our science program here at Longwood begins with plants. Why are plants so important? It is scientifically proven that flowers have immediate and long-term positive effects on emotional reactions, mood, social behaviors, and even memory. And this kind of data validation we find throughout our teams here at Longwood, as well as our guests. We have a very rich history of science here at Longwood Gardens. The study and introduction of plants has been a part of the fabric of Longwood for almost 3/4 of a century. The research division was formed in 1955 when the former vegetable garden greenhouses, which is now the current location of our terrace restaurant, were devoted to the propagation, testing, and evaluation of new plants. Shortly after that, in 1956, Longwood Gardens embarked in a cooperation with the United States Department of Agriculture and initiated a new program directed solely to the field of exploration and introduction of ornamental plants. The plants obtained through this program were grown in Longwood's experimental greenhouse. These were constructed in 1957 through 1959 and are still in use today, right behind these walls. The purpose of these greenhouses was twofold: for the introduction, propagation, and experimental growing of new and little-known potential ornamental plants from all parts of the world, and second, to improve the selected types of these plants through breeding programs. Today, Longwood Gardens is the living legacy of Pierre S. DuPont, bringing joy and inspiration to everyone through the beauty of nature, conservation, and learning. And when we pull the words from this mission, this becomes the very fabric of how we operate here in our science division. And while our science starts at Longwood, our mission is for our impact to reach our global garden. Science plays an integral role in supporting the realization and impact of this mission because we recognize that plants are inherently linked to some of the key challenges facing our world today and our outlook for tomorrow. Our work in science ensures Longwood Gardens is poised not only to further our public education in these areas, but to contribute to the solutions needed to solve them. In order to do this, we need a fantastic team of experts and leaders in their fields, and I am proud to count myself amongst the team that we have here that drives forward the science mission that we have. Our science focuses on 4 main areas: ecosystems, plants of course, and they thread through all, growing and production, and sustainability. Starting with our systems, Longwood stewards a rich array of natural communities and habitats. Both our stewardship and changes in the broader environment will shape the future of these ecosystems. The beauty of the natural world inspires us in the work that we do, and we aim to inspire people to take action to enhance the beauty and ecological health of their own environments as well. In order to do this, it's important for us to not only have a sense of place in where we are here, but where we sit in the broader sense of time and space. And so thinking about our past and for thousands of years, the Lenape communities sharing and shaping our region with their farming and game management practices, that today's native plant communities are descended from the species that thrived under their management. To the rest of the Mid-Atlantic region, where nearly all of the land was supported, that currently supports our garden, meadows, and forests, was once farmed for crops or grazing. To understanding that we're also part of an interconnected urban environment that spans over 50 million people between Boston all the way down to Washington, D.C. All of these elements are a part of the fabric that goes into our understanding and our management and work moving forward. Of Longwood's 1,100 acres, over 700 of these acres are natural lands and agricultural areas. Part of the work that we're doing here in land stewardship and ecology is mapping these areas to identify the distinct plant community types and systems that occur in our gardens. We've gotten up to about 226 different distinct plant community types that exist here. We have old growth forests that stood tall and mature in the very earliest aerial photographs ever taken of the region more than 100 years ago. In total, we have 289 acres of forest that span from these old growth forests to brand new forests that we are reforesting. We also have meadows, and Longwood's meadows are certainly an iconic element of our gardens and hold a special place in my heart. We have over 200 acres of these native warm season meadows, 86 acres of which is dedicated to the meadow garden that maybe many of you have had a chance to visit. We also have streams and wetlands, and our streams, ponds, and wetlands host special plant communities that are adapted to wet soils for both meadows and forests. We have a science-based approach to how we manage and steward our natural areas. Since 2019, we have been building the foundation for long-term science-based adaptive management. Using the results of our baseline mapping and scientific observations, this year we have embarked on developing landscape-scale strategies to support long-range planning for our natural lands. And this is very important in managing within ecosystem time and being able to measure ecological integrity now, but also then measuring the progress that we make over time. The baseline study that we've conducted has informed our stewardship planning and our understanding of our landscape, informing the types of stewardship plans for our forests and our meadows, our planting planning across all of our natural areas, and new additions to our species lists. Our stewardship science enables us to test innovative land stewardship practices relevant to many kinds of organizations, establish long-term ecological research plots across our different plant community types so that we can collaborate with institutions across the country and compare what we're finding here in our gardens and in our natural areas with other comparable areas around the world. And third, fueling adaptive management planning and decision making. This year, we've made a number of strides in these areas. First, starting on conserving biodiversity through botanical surveys and protection of some of these very rare and endangered plants. We've identified 94 new species in the gardens and in our natural areas. 37 of the 599 different species that exist in our meadow garden are endangered and under our protection. And 114 species of conservation concern are recorded across Longwood natural lands. So it is imperative for us as stewards of this land to also understand that we serve as a refuge for some of these rare and endangered plants. Another way that we conserve biodiversity is invasive species management. We have over 70 different species of invasive plants that we are currently managing across our natural areas. That has covered over 295 acres of management across the property and took about 1,788 hours of time to manage that across both our team, our contractual support, and volunteers. Other elements of what we do is focused on restoring biodiversity to these areas. And this year we've had a really amazing benchmark year, increasing the total number of plants in the gardens and natural areas by 4,644. And this spans planting more trees, planting more shrubs, and herbaceous perennials. We've also planted 2,380 linear feet of riparian buffer, and 64 new species were added into our natural areas. We also are doing a number of research studies across all of these different systems. One in particular is looking at how we can evaluate management strategies for stiltgrass, an invasive annual grass that suppresses native competitors in the ground layer. This study in particular is looking at the long-term management techniques used to evaluate the efficiency of control, impacts on the larger plant community, and a resource investment. Few long-term studies have examined management methods in this way, and so we're really focused on making sure that we can make this contribution over the next 10 years. As we look forward from a systems perspective, it's continuing to do assessments across our natural areas, continue to establish additional long-term ecological plots, and start to begin to implement these stewardship plans that we have across our gardens. Moving into the plants, which I think is probably what most of us hold near and dear, and certainly what I think you will appreciate most about the gardens here. It starts with our collections, and our living plant collections, like museums that have collections of art, here at Longwood Gardens we have collections of plants, which we refer to as our living plant collections. The living plant collections at Longwood define our displays, differentiate our guest experience, enrich our breeding programs, and play a key role in the conservation of rare and endangered plants. We have over 14,000 different plants across Longwood Gardens. So you can imagine, not all of these plants can be managed in the same way. So what we've done is we categorized our plants into different types of collections. And so our core collections are the collections that are the highest level of management and care. The core collections are vital to the legacy of Longwood Gardens and our founder, Pierre DuPont. And also, each of these collections have an assigned curator or a couple curators that are specifically focused on the care and management of these plants. And some of them require quite a level of sophistication and care and horticultural expertise. We also have legacy collections which don't have a specific curator but evolve and grow over time with our designs and with the horticulturists that oversee the areas in which they grow. Another important aspect of having plant collections here at Longwood is to be able to share some of these unique and iconic plants with other institutions around the world like us, so that visitors that come to their gardens also have the chance to experience and see these amazing plants. One example of this is our Victoria water platters, and this year, or in 2023, we were able to share seeds with over 30 different institutions, 19 of which were across the United States and 11 internationally, which totaled to over 1,400 seeds that we were able to share with these different institutions. Plant exploration infuses the diversity of our collections and the approach in which we continue to enrich our programs. And if you were here a couple weeks ago, Dr. Peter Zales shared a very exciting update on some of the travels that he's doing here in Tanzania. Plant exploration is linked to our legacy here at Longwood. It was established in 1957, and since then we've traveled to over 52 countries, including 72 different expeditions, and made over 15,000 collections. And so you see all these pink dots here, all the different places we visited, and what is probably a little bit hard to see on the screens, all of the black font there is the number of years in which we traveled to these places. As I mentioned, plant conservation has become an important thread through what we do here at Science and what we do here at Longwood Gardens. And so for us, plant conservation has a lot of different forms. In this case, it's a story of the conservation of native orchids here to Pennsylvania, which is where our orchid conservation program got started. Pennsylvania is home to 60 native terrestrial orchids, and over half of them are endangered. So we felt that it was an imperative place for us to focus on and start our plant conservation efforts. That has since built to focusing on helping to support other institutions that are trying to conserve rare and endangered orchids in their parts of the world, as well as expanding that even beyond to countries of origin like Tanzania. And as we continue to expand the program, it's now expanding to other species that are rare and endangered within the mid-Atlantic. Where we bring the science into this program is also tied to the conservation and the horticulture. And so horticultural science becomes an integral key in the conservation of these plants. So we start with collecting the seeds out in the wild and bring these seeds in. Orchid seeds in particular are quite small, almost dust-like. And then we move into germination phases. And every orchid species is different. And so the germination requirements are always a bit more nuanced and require a lot of evaluation and testing and trialing. Some orchids can be grown on a standard gel that provides nutrients to the orchids. Other orchids are very much in need of an association of a plant or a fungi that is from their native habitat. So finding and identifying the fungus that also is associated with the orchid and growing that with them on the gel. So as you can imagine, this continues to get a little bit more complicated as you move further down the process. Once we have figured out our germination process, we then move each of the individual plantlets into flasks so they can continue to grow and to develop. Once they've reached a good solid size and have robust roots and leaves, we take them out of the flasks and put them into the greenhouses for acclimatization. This is probably the most challenging part of the process because you're taking the plants out of a very cozy, warm environment that's giving them all of the nutrients they need and putting them into a greenhouse environment that has changes in light, changes in temperature, and higher disease pressure. So that becomes where we do a lot more trialing and testing on the optimal environmental conditions, substrates to grow these plants and to get them to larger size. And so this takes a lot of persistence and patience and perseverance. And you might wonder, why do we subject ourselves to this and why it can be challenging and can take years in some cases for some species. And ultimately the reason and what drives us to do this are these 2 points, is the opportunity to conserve these plants. By being able to grow these seeds and to bring these plants into a state where we can bring them into the gardens, we know that we've got a population of this orchid that is now going to persist in perpetuity. And we also have an opportunity to preserve the seeds in that case as well. But even perhaps more importantly is the opportunity to also plant these plants back into their native environments, to enrich the populations that exist so that the biodiversity that is here today, we can ensure exists in the future as well. And that in and of itself is probably the most rewarding thing about why we continue to strive through those more trials and tribulations with that. And we've made a lot of progress and headway in these areas. We have 62 orchid protocols in process out of the 145 terrestrial orchids that exist in the United States. So we're about 43% of the way there. This is not a small undertaking, and we actually are part of a national collaboration with institutions all across the country who are all working towards this effort based on their area of expertise and the orchids that occur in their areas. Additionally, this year we have propagated 2,419 orchids for research and reintroduction this year. If we were to aggregate the total numbers since the inception of this program in 2015, that's over 15,000 plants that we've been able to grow and move through this program. This year alone, we've been able to add 50 native orchids throughout the Longwood. So as the spring continues to warm up and we move to the spring and summer, you'll be able to see some of these orchids in the hillside garden, in Pierce's woods, and in the forest walk and the meadow garden. Also, a really important part of our program is connecting and working with students. And so here, this is a wonderful example of a year-long intern that worked with us last year, Nate Braddock, and he was able to conduct simple controlled experiments with a native plant that's rare to Pennsylvania, Polemonium van Bruntii, and he was able to apply a basic seed germination and ecological concepts to develop a protocol to grow these plants, get them back into the wild, and actually enhance and enrich their populations here in Pennsylvania. And as you can tell by seeing the smiling face again, how rewarding this work can be when we get all the way to the finish line. When we look at conservation horticulture and how we're looking forward, it's a number of different aspects that we'll continue to work through. It's field surveys, it's seed collection and seed banking, it's a restoration, and perhaps most importantly, placing horticulture in practice for conservation. If you're interested in learning more about seed science, Peter is giving a talk next month, or actually in April, and I'm sure we'll be diving into even more detail there. The third facet of what we do here is floriculture production, and this is where we grow our plants and integrate the science and art of horticulture into one thing to deliver plants in these extraordinary ways. This year, 120,000 seasonal plants were incorporated and added in the conservatories and in the outdoor gardens, 60% of which we grow and grow here at the gardens. And there is a vast diversity of plants that we grow from all over the world that require all different kinds of growing conditions. 1,200 different cultivars, 780 different plant species, 379 genera. Everything has a little bit different nuance in terms of how long we need to grow them in the greenhouses. 15 have to take between 1 to 5 years, so we're planning very far in advance to get some of these really amazing plants to the gardens. And it's not just about the science of growing plants, although growing is certainly the cornerstone of what we do here. It's also about the science of the logistics and the planning and the aggregation of meeting these timelines and aggregating all of these different cultural requirements at once. So there is a huge amount of complexity and nuance to this, and our team works very closely with the conservatory teams, the outdoor teams, and the design teams to come up with plans that are completely novel and very inspired. And so you can imagine, because of the diversity of plants that we have, the sophistication of our facilities requires that same level of standard. And so we have over 100,000 square feet of greenhouse space where we have 29 different types of environmental control zones so that we can adjust and manipulate the environmental conditions specific to the different types of plants that we're growing to reach these amazing end results. And if that wasn't complicated enough, we also work and incorporate all different types of techniques into our horticultural practice. So from the flowering crops that you see dotted throughout the conservatory beds, to growing bulbs and specialty chrysanthemum forms, standards, and baskets, all of these weave themselves through our program. Baskets are certainly an iconic element of what we do and take a lot of pride here at Longwood. 584 baskets in the last year, and we're really excited about the fact that we're going to be adding 168 more baskets in the new West Conservatory when that opens. So if you can just imagine that alone, amongst all of the other amazing things you'll see, is going to be an element to look forward to. Just the diversity of baskets in which we grow. These are hydrangea macrophylla, so these are grown from the greenhouses. It's really important with the hydrangeas to identify cultivars that can work together. They also require specific environmental growing conditions, so those all get tailored and customized to meet the specific timelines that we're trying to strive towards. Additionally, other baskets like these Guzmania, it's as much about the construction and engineering of bringing these plants together in order for them to work and grow once they're in the conservatories. And certainly one of the most technically horticulturally challenging are our chrysanthemum baskets, and these take about 15 months of very close training and technique taught from Japanese artisans to bring these beautiful and magnificent baskets to life. When we look about some of the things coming in the future, these are some of the plants that are growing in the greenhouses now that we're testing and growing for the West Conservatory or potential incorporation into other areas in the garden. So more to come there. Standards are another very iconic element of what we do. A standard means training a plant to have a tree form. So getting that straight stem and top of beautiful foliage and flowers. Often it's a plant that typically does not grow like that. So we're challenging ourselves with horticulture and technique and training in order to achieve that. And so we've grown 201 of those in 2023. Here's a beautiful picture of Clerodendron quadriculare. If you came in that back exit door over there, there's some beautiful specimens here today. This is a beautiful flowering plant native to New Guinea and the Philippines. We also grow standards for the outdoor gardens. So this, in the foreground, you see Brugmansia, Angel's trumpet, and Alamanda vine, the yellow standard in the back. You can just imagine the challenges that we were faced with trying to get a vine to grow as a tree, but really an impressive and eye-catching end result. And we have our lantana standards. These take over 24 months to grow into these beautiful trees, but are a complete array of pollinators that surround them in the summer months between butterflies and hummingbirds, so certainly well worth the effort. And we're constantly evolving our programs, and we have a trial program that funnels a number of different things through. This is just one of many examples where freesia are something that grace the conservatories this time of year with their fragrance and their color. So we're looking at new cultivars of freesia with new colors and new fragrance that we hope to incorporate moving forward. And last but not least is our sustainability. And sustainability is a really important aspect of everything that we do here at Longwood, and we want to make sure that we're as mindful about the environment in which we are and our impact on it. And so for science, where we focus on is on the soils and composting side. And that starts with the materials that we're using. So in production, over 3/4 of the pots that we grow in are fiber pots, so that these pots can be incorporated into our compost stream. And so what we do with any plant material that does move out of the gardens or displays is that we separate everything. So we separate the pots, we separate the soil, we separate the plants and the woody material, and each of those feed into a different component or material or substrate that we make so that we can circulate that back into the gardens in a new way. And so this is one example of our compost program. We're evaluating constantly new ways to manipulate and grow and to produce the compost in close connection with the team at the gardens to ensure that we're getting the end result that they're hoping for in terms of enriching the organic matter content in the garden beds, water retention, and nutrient availability for the plants. So just constant evolution. We're really quite proud of how the compost program has evolved. It's actually also available at the gift shop. So it is the first amendment that we make here at the gardens that we are now moving towards being able to make that available to the public. And that's just the beginning. We're working continuously on creating quality specifications and optimizing the different amendments that we're making out of products that come right from this garden within our aged hardwood mulch, the wood chips that come through, and also our leaf mulch. And where does this all end up circulating back into? So we take the beauty from the garden and reintegrate it to create more beauty. And so here we have these rolling expanses of our green lawns. These get top dressed with compost in the spring. And we move to our idea garden and the vegetable gardens, and we utilize the compost here as well as some of our mulches. We move into Pierce's Woods, and this is a place where we actually use a special blend of acidic compost for those woody plants that prefer acidic soils. And certainly can't forget the iconic flower garden walk, where we also utilize a number of these materials that recirculate back into the space to make sure that the quality and health of the soils that we're growing our plants in remains intact and continues to be enriched and fortified moving forward. But what it all comes down to here at Longwood, and certainly within the science team, are the people. We're proud to be the stewards of the program today as we continue to trailblaze to the next ones who will carry the torch. The secret to the impact we have been able to make is tied to the passion, creativity, and collaboration that occurs across our team. And what drives us is the hope that in the pursuit of our knowledge, we become part of something bigger than ourselves, where we strive to leave the world better than we found it, and we hope that we can inspire others to do the same. And the really important thing for us is to make sure that we're sharing the work we're doing with as many people as possible, because we envision a world where our gardens and our science is accessible to all. And these are just a few of the ways that we've accomplished this past year. We've taught over 15 different classes. We've had 23 students and interns move through our programs. We've presented over 37 different times here at Longwood, as well as traveled domestically and internationally to share our work at 45 different conferences. We've conducted 85 science-specific tours throughout the gardens this past year, and written about an article a month, although with Jessica now on the team, I think we'll start to see even more articles coming out of our program. So it is a really rich and deep program that we are continuing to share the work that we're doing. But with that, I will leave this for questions. Again, thank you so much for your time and for the opportunity to share just some of the many things that are going on in our division. Thank you. Yes.
I was just curious whether the gardens has to use any pesticides, for instance, fungicides, herbicides, insecticides, or even plant growth regulators on any of these things, because as you know, plant growth regulator is considered a pesticide.
Yes, so the question was, do we use pesticides or fungicides or insecticides on any of the plants that we grow in the gardens? And the answer is yes. We have an integrated pest management program where we have an actual plant health team that is dedicated to scouting and evaluating the plants across the gardens to ensure that the health of these plants, is top priority. But we follow all guidelines towards that program. We also have a beneficial insect program. So in addition to utilizing the chemicals where and if we need to, it's also about the counterbalance of other opportunities from a beneficial insect perspective or biological amendments. So we try to be as holistic as possible with the program and how we manage it. Any other questions?
Are there any available online courses sponsored by you that laymen and/or people like me involved in environmental committees could access? It's a long drive to get here, and I really can't get here that often. Or do you record any of your lessons? Like, is this one being recorded so people can access it later?
Yes, thank you. Great question. So the question is, do we teach any classes specific to what we do here at Science, or are we recording any of the program that we're sharing here today? So I'll start with the second question. This is being recorded. All of our Science Series sessions this year are being recorded and will be made available in various aspects. So that is something that we have amended from last year. And in terms of classes, we have a really robust continuing education program where members of the science team participate, as well as other experts in various fields within Longwood Gardens, as well as external support staff that will come in and teach. So I would recommend checking that out.
I'm not a planter, but you always read about invasiveness. I'm actually CRC watershed. We're always pulling invasive plants. I mean, how do you handle that, the invasives and stuff like that?
That's a great question. So the question was about how we manage invasives and make sure that we aren't introducing invasives or facilitating the introduction of invasives. So that is certainly at the forefront of what we do here, is to make sure that we're not introducing invasive plants. So one of the as you noticed, obviously also what we do with our native lands, we're managing right now 70 invasive species that currently exist today, 1,700 hours. So it's very much at the forefront of our mind that we don't want to add anything to that facet. So any plants that are new to this region go through a very strict assessment process to identify and assess if there's any invasive characteristics whatsoever. There's also already a standardized list of plants that have, or basically families of plants that have invasive or known invasive tendencies. So anything on any of those lists is never something that we would bring back here to Longwood to ensure that we are not contributing to that. And we're constantly also evaluating and keeping our eye out, and part of actually an international or a global network that is scouting for this. And I think botanic gardens serve as a great way to be sentinels to look for invasive species and identify them early so that hopefully they don't become devastating to our natural environments.
Is there any seed collection that is going on for our serpentine barrens? And furthermore, would Longwood consider having an educational exhibit on the rare, ecologically fragile serpentine barren system that we have right here in Chester County?
That's a great question. Right now, I'm not familiar with if there's any specific collection programs focused on the serpentine barrens, but certainly with regards to the fact that it is a local, regional area of importance, it's certainly something that we could look into.
Sorry, I just wanted to interject. I'm the chair of the Friends of the State Line Serpentine Barrens, which is the volunteer group that works on some of these, so I'd be happy to talk about that after the program.
Thank you. We have a rich community involved in conservation across the different systems. Thank you. Yes, sir.
The flora and fauna of any area changes over time, succession, one process. The word sustainability has the connotation of status quo, keeping things the same. Is there any effort to study the effect of climate change on, for example, our big pasture out there, meadow? Is any effort being made to study the effect on the flora and fauna of that as our environment perhaps changes, global warming being one example?
That's an excellent question. So the question was, is any work being done to evaluate the effects of climate change or potential effects of climate change will have on our meadow garden or any of our other spaces? And so absolutely, that is something that all of our teams are looking at, both at the species level as well as the systems level. And so you may hear terms such as assisted migration. So some of the things that we're looking at, and that is actually helping to inform some of our planting plans, is looking at some of these trajectories of how warm things are potentially looking to be, and looking at more southern species that we are kind of assisting in migrating and incorporating into these different spaces, with the expectation that, yes, in let's say 20, 25 years, maybe sooner, maybe longer, the temperature is going to be warmer here. And so what species are best adapted to that is informing our plans for not only the meadow gardens, but certainly more longer term, more prominent species like our trees. And so that is something that we're looking at and working with institutions actually across the world on.
Hi. I have a 13-year-old daughter who's very much into plants and conservation and ecology, and she couldn't be here today, unfortunately, although I'd probably just embarrass her if she were here. But two questions for you. One is, how did you get into this field? And two, what advice would you give to youngsters kind of figuring out what they want to do, in high school and beyond and with their careers to get into this field?
Thank you. So the question is, how did I get into this, and what advice would I have for young children or individuals that are really interested in getting into this field? So I grew up loving the outdoors, but I didn't realize that it was a field until I got to college, and it was kind of an epiphany moment for me, where I was hiking with a friend and was thinking I was going to be a medical doctor, and she was saying that she was thinking she was going to go into plants, and it just was a light bulb moment for me, and it caused me to pivot, and I focused on plant biology as an undergraduate and haven't looked back. And I think for me, one of the things that I found incredibly rewarding about my journey is it continues to evolve. I started in the industry, I started in research and academia, but then went into the cultivated world, but am now able to take the horticulture approaches that I have to conservation. And so I think for anyone that's interested in this area, we have a really wonderful program for young kids and young adults that are interested in horticulture here at Longwood that they could get involved with. Also, there's a wonderful nonprofit organization called Seed Your Future that is specifically focused on bringing horticulture and bringing plants and the careers with plants to students. And they have a wonderful website that has all different types. I think there are well over 80 different careers listed there. It also has internships, universities that have programs. So I would certainly recommend checking that out.
I'm from North Jersey. We were recently rezoned from 6B to 7. So there's new plants I can start looking at to grow. Did that happen here, and are there things that you're looking at that you weren't able to grow before?
Yes, so similarly, I think they updated the entire plant hardiness map for the United States. So I think everybody probably noticed that there was at least a half a zone shift. And I think we can anticipate that that's going to continue to happen to some level and degree. So yes, some of the things that have been, that maybe we've had to take a little bit more tender love and care because of very severe winters, now we're finding are more established here. One plant that we have been evaluating that has recently gone into some of the spaces in the gardens is actually live oak, which is very well known in the South, especially in Florida. And so historically, that's never been able to make it through our winters, but now, we're basically in the very northern tip of its range, and we're now finding that some of these trees are actually taking hold. Now, I don't think we're at the point where we're going to get them to the size that they are down south, where they're really entrenched in the climate that they're accustomed to, but things like that we are already starting to see as they nod.
Hello. I was wondering how your experiences compared between working in academia, industry, and working in a botanical garden like Longwood Gardens.
Yes, great question. So how has my experience changed from working in academia to industry to Longwood Gardens? I think for me it's been an evolution. And so what academia taught me were the principles of science and the scientific method and how to approach a question and to try to get to an answer in a data-driven, constructive way. And I think that's been foundational to how I have approached everything I've done since. Industry gave me a sense of the practicality of the world in which we live and how the majority of people interface and can get access to plants. So it, I think, gave me an understanding of how to connect with people and plants in a much broader scale, but also the evolution and development of new plants and how that works both in the United States but internationally. And here at Longwood, I think it's come to a point where it's found meaning and mission, because it's now moving to something where I feel like I'm contributing to something bigger than myself, and that's been incredibly rewarding.
You had mentioned about when you're propagating the orchids that sometimes you need to bring over certain funguses for them. How do you prevent those funguses from escaping into the wild?
So in this case, when we're working with the fungi, they're native fungi to Pennsylvania. So we're focusing on native orchids and the native fungi. And so certainly we can't be, and we don't ship soil from other parts of the world here for that very reason. We don't want to be bringing things in that we shouldn't be. And so we do some of the work here. The Smithsonian is actually the institution that specializes in both the identification and isolation of these different fungi and their associations with the orchids.
Yes, please. Your own career went through academia and industry and research. How does Longwood Garden cooperate with universities and other research centers? And are you sort of the laboratory for the science people at the university, or how does that work?
Oh, that's a great question. So the question is how do we work, or are there collaborations that exist with Longwood Science and other institutions? And so there's a number of different facets in which we have collaborations, but yes, we do. There's so many to distill it down. Ultimately, yes, we have collaborations where scientists will come here and conduct research. In other cases, we're conducting research here that then is replicated at some of the other institutions that are conducting the research. In other cases, it's identifying where we can contribute to a component of a product, and maybe the institution we have a small laboratory here, but doesn't have all of the sophistication of some of the molecular laboratories that some of the universities have. So we may focus on one facet of the field exploration and the horticultural aspect of the research here, and then hand off more of the genetic work to the university and our collaborators on that front. You're welcome.
Hi. One of the slides that you had mentioned that there were some new species, and I was curious, does that mean species you had never seen here before, or it was just maybe within this year compared to last year?
Both, I would say. So the question is in reference to new species being identified, how compared to this year versus last year or on a broader scale. So one of the things is it comes down to if we're not getting out in the field and identifying what's there, we don't know what's there. It's based on, in some cases, very old records or maybe incomplete records. So what we really wanted to make sure we did as a baseline is identify what is here now so that when we look again in 10 years, we can see that evolution over time. And certainly we hope that the species richness continues to increase as we continue to steward the land. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you again for your time and for your amazing questions, and we hope to see you again soon at one of our next Science Series talks. Thank you.